The House of Lancaster rose to power, not by divine right, but by calculated rebellion. Henry Bolingbroke, the son of John of Gaunt and cousin to King Richard II, was no stranger to intrigue. As a young noble, he joined the Lords Appellant in 1388, a group of powerful barons who revolted against the king's favourites. Though others faced punishment, Henry walked away unscathed, ambitious, unbroken, and watching. But in 1398, that fragile favour shattered. Exiled from court after a dispute with the Duke of Norfolk, Henry watched helplessly as his father died the following year. Worse still, King Richard II blocked his rightful inheritance of the vast Lancastrian estates after the death of John of Gaunt in 1399. Henry did not forgive. He did not forget. That same year, he returned to England while the king was campaigning in Ireland. With a boldness that would change history, he rallied allies, seized power, imprisoned Richard, and forced his abdication. The crown was his. And with it, the Wars of the Roses had been quietly, fatally seeded. As Henry IV, he became the first English monarch since the Norman conquest whose mother tongue was English, not French, a symbolic shift for a kingdom steeped in change. But Henry's reign was no peaceful reward. From the fiery rebellion of Owain Glyndwr, a Welsh claimant to the title of Prince of Wales, to the treacherous uprising of Henry Percy, commonly known as Hotspur, a former ally turned enemy, Henry's rule was forged in the fires of revolt. In 1403, at Shrewsbury, he struck down Hotspur in a brutal battle that tested the very survival of his dynasty. Though Henry crushed his enemies, his health slowly declined. As illness overtook him, his eldest son, Henry of Monmouth, gradually assumed control of the government from 1410 onward. Henry IV died in 1413, worn down by war and sickness, but having held the crown through storms of betrayal. He left behind 6 children from his first marriage to Mary de Bohun. His second marriage, to Joan of Navarre, bore no heirs. But from Mary, his legacy would blaze into legend, through his son, who now rose as Henry V, warrior prince and king of destiny. As the fires of rebellion dimmed under Henry IV, a new flame was rising, a flame born not of caution, but of conquest. Henry of Monmouth, eldest son of the king, became Prince of Wales in 1399, the moment his father seized the crown. Yet from the very beginning, his title was challenged by a man who would become a legend in Wales, Owain Glyndwr. In 1400, Glyndwr rose in revolt, proclaiming himself the true Prince of Wales, not a title granted by an English king, but one taken by ancestral right and popular will. His rebellion burned across the Welsh hills, fueled by national pride and English arrogance. It was the last serious Welsh attempt at independence, and for over a decade, it held the crown's attention. As a young commander, Henry of Monmouth cut his teeth in this brutal conflict, leading campaigns against Glyndwr's forces. His early military training was forged in a war of ambushes, sieges, and bitter winter marches. The Percy family of Northumberland, once royal allies, turned against the Lancastrian king. At the Battle of Shrewsbury in 1403, young Henry, just 16, fought at the very heart of the fray. An arrow pierced his face, yet he refused to leave the field. He fought on, bloodied but unbroken, as Hotspur Percy fell and the rebellion collapsed. Even as he matured, Henry found himself at odds with his father. Political disagreements widened the gulf between them, especially as the king's health declined. From 1410, Henry took on more of the realm's governance, but not always with his father's blessing. When Henry IV died in 1413, the prince, now a man hardened by war and politics, took the throne as Henry V. He brought with him a clear vision, to claim what he believed was rightfully England's: the crown of France. In 1415, he revived the Old English claim and launched his campaign. His first strike was at Harfleur, a strategic port. It fell, but at great cost. Weakened by disease and short on supplies, Henry marched his men toward Calais, only to be intercepted by a massive French force. At Agincourt, on October 25, 1415, Henry's weary army faced annihilation. But the day ended with a miracle. The mud-soaked field ran red with French blood. Henry's outnumbered archers and dismounted knights destroyed the flower of French nobility. Agincourt became legend. With his name now etched in glory, Henry pressed further. In his second campaign, beginning 1417, he reclaimed Normandy, advanced on Paris, and exploited deep divisions in the French court. The mad King of France, Charles VI, was helpless. In 1420, under the Treaty of Troyes, Henry was recognized as heir and regent of France. He married Catherine of Valois, daughter of Charles VI, and stood poised to unite two crowns. England and France, joined not by treaty, but by blood. But fate, always fickle, turned away. In August 1422, Henry V died suddenly, just 35 years old, before he could wear the crown of France. Charles VI died weeks later. The crowns of England and France passed not to warriors, but to an infant, barely a year old. An empire had been won by the sword, yet was now balanced in the hands of a child. The boy who would be king was crowned in gold, but raised in shadows of uncertainty and ambition. At just 9 months old, Henry VI inherited the crowns of both England and France, embodying his father's conquests. Where once a legendary warrior king ruled, now an innocent infant sat surrounded by dangerous factions. Two powerful uncles governed in his name, holding the fragile kingdom together. John of Bedford commanded England's diminishing armies in France with remarkable skill and determination. Humphrey, Duke of Gloucester, known as Good Duke Humphrey, protected the young king and ruled England in his stead. For a brief time, their uneasy partnership managed to preserve Henry V's legacy of conquest. Outside the city of Orléans, a barefoot peasant girl in armor shattered English momentum completely. Joan of Arc, claiming visions from God, led French forces to astonishing victories against English power. In 1431, young Henry was crowned King of France at Notre Dame Cathedral, a hollow but symbolic triumph. Yet as sacred chants filled the air, the foundation beneath English rule began to crack. With the death of Bedford in 1435, England lost its finest general and its last real hope. The loss of Bedford allowed France to recover while England's position collapsed rapidly on the continent. Meanwhile, as Henry grew older, dangerous political shadows gathered thickly in England's royal court. By 1437, at the age of 15, Henry assumed personal rule, though utterly unprepared for power. He was a gentle, devout, and passive man who despised confrontation and shrank from conflict entirely. In this void of leadership, ambitious courtiers rose swiftly to dominate the weak young king. William de la Pole, Duke of Suffolk, and Edmund Beaufort, Duke of Somerset, gained enormous influence rapidly. Suffolk and Somerset solidified their power by arranging Henry's marriage to Margaret of Anjou, a clever and fiercely ambitious young queen. Barely 15, Margaret quickly aligned herself with her political sponsors, using their influence to manipulate the gentle and passive king. However, standing in their path was good Duke Humphrey, who opposed this French marriage alliance strongly. He viewed Margaret's growing influence with suspicion and resisted the factions' increasing dominance at court. In 1447, Gloucester was arrested on fabricated charges of treason by his powerful enemies. Just days later, he was found dead under mysterious and suspicious circumstances, likely murdered. Many whispered that Margaret herself orchestrated his death to eliminate her most dangerous domestic opponent. But another threat to Margaret's faction loomed beyond the court's political games and secret murders. Richard, Duke of York, a prince of the blood and a proven military commander, watched silently. York's maternal Mortimer bloodline still ran strong, tracing back to Lionel of Antwerp, second son of Edward III. His father, Richard of Conisbrough, had been executed for treason after orchestrating the Southampton plot, a failed conspiracy to place his brother-in-law, Edmund Mortimer, on the throne. Raised under the care of Ralph Neville, Earl of Westmoreland, York married his daughter Cecily Neville, cementing powerful alliances. Trained militarily by Bedford, York rose to serve loyally as governor of France in Henry's name. However, Somerset and Suffolk deliberately sabotaged him, cutting funds and undermining his authority across the Channel. Margaret and her allies exiled York to Ireland, hoping distance would eliminate his political threat. However, in Ireland, York governed wisely, earning the unwavering loyalty of the Irish nobility and gentry. The seeds of civil war were quietly sown as resentment grew across both kingdoms. Eventually forced to return to England, York arrived during the Jack Cade Rebellion, fueled by public anger. Many suspected that Jack Cade's rebellion, protesting corruption, carried Yorkist sympathies against Somerset and Suffolk's corrupt rule. In 1453, disaster struck when England lost nearly all its remaining possessions in France permanently. Upon hearing this devastating news, Henry VI suffered a complete mental and physical collapse into catatonia. For over a year, Henry lay unresponsive, unable even to recognize his newborn son, Edward of Westminster. Whispers soon circulated that Prince Edward was not Henry's son, but Somerset's illegitimate offspring. With the king incapacitated, Parliament summoned York and named him Lord Protector of England. As Protector, York governed efficiently, restoring order, imprisoning Somerset, and curbing widespread corruption within the royal household. However, in late 1454, Henry miraculously recovered from his illness, though still weak and confused. Margaret immediately reclaimed control, stripping York of authority and releasing Somerset from imprisonment. With both factions hardened, York could no longer trust the king he had once served loyally. In 1455, unable to see any peaceful solution, York took up arms against his enemies. At St. Albans, York's forces attacked first, killing Somerset and capturing King Henry himself during the battle. Though victorious, York did not yet seize the throne but demanded to be named Henry's heir. Henry reluctantly agreed, disinheriting his own son Prince Edward under York's growing political pressure. But Queen Margaret refused to yield. Over the next 4 years, England descended into a brutal spiral of civil war. Here, another player entered the stage who would change the course of history. Richard Neville, Earl of Warwick, York's cousin by marriage, son of the Earl of Salisbury, and soon to become the most powerful noble in England. He would be known to history as the Kingmaker. Warwick's wealth, military genius, and daring made him indispensable to York's cause. In 1459, at Ludford Bridge, York's forces disintegrated after the betrayal of Andrew Trollope. The so-called battle became a massacre of civilians in Ludlow, witnessed by York's young sons George and Richard, whose horror at the slaughter would shape their futures. York fled to Ireland once again. Warwick held fast in Calais. In Coventry, Margaret convened the Parliament of Devils, declaring York, Warwick, and their supporters traitors, stripping them of titles and lands. But in 1460, York returned. Marching into Parliament, his son Edmund of Rutland carried his father's sword upright, a clear signal of his claim. York laid his hand upon the empty throne and declared his right to rule. Parliament acknowledged him. York and his heirs were recognized as successors to the crown. But Margaret struck back. In December 1460, at Wakefield, she lured York into an ambush. He and his son Edmund were killed. Salisbury was captured and executed. Their severed heads were displayed on the gates of York, mocked with paper crowns. York's death could have ended the Yorkist cause, but it did not. His eldest son, Edward of March, only 18, now led the Yorkist army. Tall, charismatic, and militarily brilliant, Edward found in Warwick a powerful ally. In 1461, the decisive battle came at Towton, fought amid a blizzard on Palm Sunday, the bloodiest battle ever fought on English soil. Over 28,000 men perished. Edward, leading his army to crushing victory, annihilated Lancastrian resistance. The House of Lancaster was broken. Henry VI and Margaret fled north, into exile. Edward Plantagenet was proclaimed King Edward IV, the first Yorkist king of England. The House of York had risen from shadow and blood to seize the crown, sweeping away the weak rule of Henry VI, the ambitions of Margaret, and the corrupt cabal that had plunged England into civil war. But even as Edward IV ascended the throne, the shadows of war had not fully passed. Old enemies lurked. New rivalries would soon rise, even within the Yorkist house itself. The Wars of the Roses were far from over. Don't miss our videos on the origins of the houses of Lancaster and York, and the dramatic rise and fall of the House of York, where the Yorkists began turning on each other after the Lancasters were no more. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe to our channel.